Today's story is about Rachel and Michael, a couple whose wedding day took an unexpected turn and became a moment of heartbreak, reflection, and life lessons. In this video, we will explore how love, honesty, and difficult decisions intertwined on what was meant to be the happiest day of their lives. You'll hear the full journey from their early moments together to the emotional letter that changed everything, along with insights into human relationships, emotional resilience, and the lessons we can all take from their experience. If you enjoy thoughtful and emotional stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that touches the heart and mind. Rachel had been dreaming of this day for as long as she could remember, picturing every detail from the delicate lace on her wedding dress to the soft glow of candles lining the aisle. Standing in the grand hall of the country estate where the ceremony was to take place, she felt the familiar mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Yet beneath the surface of her joy, a quiet unease lingered, one that she hadn't been able to articulate until the morning of her wedding. Michael, the man Rachel had loved deeply for nearly 5 years, had been her constant through college, early career struggles, and countless life milestones. Their relationship was often described by friends as timeless, the kind of bond that made others believe in enduring love. They had shared dreams of traveling the world together, buying a home filled with laughter and warmth, and building a family rooted in shared values and unwavering trust. Rachel had imagined walking down the aisle to meet him, believing that nothing could disrupt the path they had so carefully carved together. As the hours passed, however, subtle signs began to emerge that something was amiss. Michael, usually punctilious and calm, appeared unusually tense, his hands occasionally trembling as he adjusted his tie or checked the time. Friends who arrived early noticed his distracted demeanor, the brief moments when his gaze drifted away from Rachel and the ceremony preparations. Experts in relationship dynamics note that sudden behavioral changes, particularly in high-stakes emotional situations, can signal internal conflict, fear, or unspoken doubts, often masked by attempts to maintain composure. Rachel, attuned to his patterns after years together, felt the shift immediately but chose to trust the man she knew so well. The morning unfolded with a flurry of activity. Florists arranging blooms, photographers setting up their equipment, and family members bustling to ensure that every detail reflected Rachel's vision. In quiet moments between tasks, Rachel glanced at Michael, noting the tension in his jaw and the way his eyes seemed to dart away from her presence. She tried to brush aside the gnawing feeling in her stomach, focusing instead on the smiles of her closest friends and the excitement that had carried her through the months of planning. Yet there was an unmistakable heaviness, a sense that the day might not unfold exactly as she had imagined. Michael's internal struggle, invisible to most, was profound. For weeks leading up to the wedding, he had wrestled with emotions that were difficult to reconcile. He cared deeply for Rachel, valuing every shared memory, every quiet evening and adventure, every instance of support and encouragement. And yet he had begun to recognize differences in their visions for the future, differences that could no longer be ignored without risking long-term unhappiness for both of them. Psychologists often describe such cognitive dissonance in relationships as an internal tug-of-war between affection and self-preservation, where the desire to maintain harmony conflicts with the recognition of unmet needs or incompatible life goals. Michael's love for Rachel was real, but so too was his awareness that proceeding without honesty could inflict deeper harm over time. The turning point came in a small, nearly imperceptible moment: the exchange of a folded envelope in the quiet of the bridal suite. Rachel had been adjusting her veil when she noticed Michael approach with a letter in hand, his expression unreadable. There were no words spoken, no explanations, only the envelope pressed gently into her hands. The script on the front, familiar and deliberate, carried a weight she could not yet comprehend. Friends outside the room were unaware of the silent exchange, the calm before an emotional storm that would redefine the day entirely. Rachel, initially confused, opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, she found a carefully written letter, each word reflecting the depth of Michael's love and the complexity of his emotions. He spoke of gratitude for the years they had shared, the ways in which she had shaped his life, and the profound impact of their bond. But he also expressed a truth that had become impossible to ignore. Despite his love, he could not continue toward marriage, knowing that his path and hers might ultimately diverge. The letter was neither angry nor dismissive. It was heartfelt, honest, and painfully empathetic. Relationship counselors often emphasize that such acts of candid communication, though devastating, demonstrate a form of respect that preserves dignity for both parties, allowing the bereaved partner to understand the motivation rather than be left in confusion. Rachel read and reread the words, her mind a swirl of emotions. Shock, heartbreak, and disbelief collided with a faint recognition of the courage it took to confront truth over comfort. Experts in grief and loss note that unexpected endings in the context of significant emotional investment often provoke a duality of reaction. Intense sorrow paired with reluctant admiration for the honesty exhibited. Rachel felt both, the immediate sting of separation and the lingering acknowledgement that Michael's decision, though agonizing, was rooted in integrity. Outside the bridal suite, preparations continued, oblivious to the emotional upheaval contained within those walls. The band tuned instruments, photographers adjusted lenses, and guests began to arrive, unaware of the seismic shift about to unfold. Rachel, after a moment of stunned silence, composed herself with remarkable poise. She had always been admired for her grace under pressure, a trait that would now be tested beyond measure. Experts in emotional resilience highlight that the ability to respond to sudden emotional trauma with composure is a key predictor of adaptive coping, allowing individuals to navigate immediate crises while preserving long-term psychological health. In the hours that followed, Rachel made choices that balanced self-preservation with consideration for those around her. She quietly informed her closest family members, allowing them to provide support and guidance. She asked for privacy from the larger wedding party, recognizing that attempting to continue as though nothing had happened would be both impossible and emotionally dishonest. Her decision to step back, to honor her own feelings while respecting the gravity of the day, reflected a maturity that underscored the depth of her character. Observers, including psychologists and relationship experts, often point out that sudden emotional ruptures in high-stakes events like weddings serve as critical junctures for self-discovery. They force individuals to confront not only loss, but also their capacity for resilience, empathy, and perspective-taking. Rachel's response exemplified these principles, balancing immediate emotional processing with deliberate action, allowing for both private mourning and thoughtful reflection. As the story unfolded, questions naturally arose about the broader implications for relationships, commitment, and the role of emotional honesty. Social commentators note that cultural expectations around weddings, ritualized celebration, public affirmation of partnership, and the symbolic weight of ceremony can intensify both joy and distress. When an unexpected revelation occurs, the contrast between anticipated joy and sudden heartbreak magnifies emotional impact, highlighting the importance of preparedness, communication, and personal awareness in relational dynamics. Rachel's experience, while deeply personal, also serves as a lens through which viewers can examine universal themes. The delicate balance between love and compatibility, the courage required to make difficult decisions, and the necessity of self-reflection even amidst deep emotional attachment. The situation underscores the principle that authentic love sometimes manifests not in permanence, but in the willingness to act with honesty, even when doing so inflicts temporary pain. In these early hours of what was meant to be a celebratory day, Rachel's world had shifted irreversibly. Yet embedded within the heartbreak was a quiet testament to her resilience, dignity, and capacity for reflection. Friends and family, though initially shocked, began to recognize that this was not a tale of failure, but of integrity. An acknowledgement that love's true measure sometimes lies in the courage to prioritize truth over comfort. And as Rachel stood in the quiet of the bridal suite, letter in hand, the morning sun streaming through the tall windows, she felt the first tremors of understanding begin to emerge. The day that had begun with anticipation and joy now carried a lesson in emotional courage, the fragility of expectations, and the profound necessity of self-honesty in matters of the heart. The narrative paused at this delicate juncture, leaving viewers with the unspoken question: how does one navigate the intersection of love, commitment, and unforeseen revelation when the future appears suddenly uncharted? The moments after Rachel read Michael's letter were filled with a silence so profound it seemed almost tangible. The quiet of the bridal suite contrasted sharply with the festive preparations outside, creating a surreal sense of separation from the world she had envisioned. Every detail, the delicate petals on the aisle, the soft hum of conversations beyond the room, the faint melody of the string quartet tuning, suddenly felt distant, almost dreamlike. Rachel's mind, however, was intensely focused, parsing the carefully chosen words of the letter, each sentence a reminder of love's complexity and the sometimes painful necessity of truth. In those hours, Rachel's internal dialogue became a careful negotiation between heartbreak and understanding. She reflected on the past 5 years she had shared with Michael. The long conversations that stretched into the night, the spontaneous road trips, the quiet moments of shared laughter that now seemed frozen in memory. Experts in grief psychology often emphasize that reflective processing after sudden relational loss helps individuals integrate emotional experiences, transforming initial shock into meaningful insight. Rachel's natural tendency for introspection allowed her to begin this process almost immediately, even in the midst of a day that had been planned for celebration. Family members, once informed, responded with a mix of shock, sorrow, and support. Her mother, holding back tears, reminded Rachel of her own strength, recounting instances from Rachel's childhood where she had demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity. Close friends shared quiet words of encouragement, affirming that stepping back was not an act of failure, but a courageous decision grounded in self-respect. The emotional energy in the room shifted subtly, from grief toward cautious empowerment. Relationship counselors often note that social support in such moments is a critical buffer against emotional overwhelm, helping individuals feel both understood and less isolated in their pain. Meanwhile, Michael remained outside the bridal suite, acutely aware of the magnitude of his actions. His decision to step back from a life he knew would bring him and Rachel unspoken suffering was emotionally taxing. The tension in his posture and the weight in his eyes reflected the internal cost of honesty, an experience that, according to experts in emotional intelligence, is often far more complex than the external consequences might suggest. Michael had not arrived at this choice impulsively. It was the result of weeks of reflection, late-night conversations with trusted mentors, and a painful recognition that love, while powerful, cannot substitute for fundamental compatibility. As word slowly spread to the wedding staff, the mood of the venue began to shift in subtle ways. Coordinators noticed the change in energy, yet they maintained professionalism, offering gentle assistance and adapting plans where possible. Psychologists studying ritualized social events often note that unexpected disruptions, especially those that challenge deep emotional expectations, require rapid emotional recalibration for all involved. The staff's ability to respond calmly and supportively became an unseen but essential element of Rachel's coping process. Rachel, despite the initial shock, began to articulate her emotions internally in ways that reflected both clarity and strength. She acknowledged grief without allowing it to consume her, a process that mental health professionals describe as adaptive emotion regulation. She recognized her love for Michael and the pain of losing the shared future she had envisioned. Yet she also allowed herself to consider the wisdom in his honesty. The paradox of heartbreak mingled with admiration created a nuanced emotional landscape, one that highlighted the complexity of adult relationships and the interplay between love, self-awareness, and ethical responsibility. As she contemplated the next steps, Rachel also began to reflect on the larger lessons this experience might offer to viewers and others navigating similar emotional upheaval. She recognized the importance of honest communication, even when it disrupts expectations, and the necessity of honoring one's own needs alongside the needs of a loved one. Relationship experts often point out that personal integrity in difficult decisions fosters long-term emotional health, even if it entails short-term pain. Rachel's internal reflection mirrored this principle, allowing her to frame the day not as a catastrophic loss, but as a profound learning experience. Michael's actions, though heartbreaking, sparked a complex spectrum of responses among those who observed the unfolding events. Friends who had known the couple for years expressed a mixture of sorrow and respect, acknowledging the courage required to make a decision that prioritized long-term well-being over immediate gratification. Social psychologists studying relational dynamics often describe this as an example of prosocial honesty, the act of prioritizing ethical transparency over self-interest, even in emotionally charged circumstances. In this context, Michael's choice was not merely a personal decision, but also a social act that demonstrated moral consideration, albeit at a high personal cost. The ripple effects of this revelation extended beyond the immediate family and friends. In the age of social media, even private events like this are subject to scrutiny, commentary, and public reflection. Experts in digital sociology emphasize that the sharing of deeply personal relational events can provoke collective empathy, with audiences responding through both emotional resonance and reflective engagement. Although Rachel and Michael had initially chosen privacy, the story inevitably sparked discussions among their broader community, highlighting universal themes of love, loss, and the importance of self-honesty. Amidst the emotional intensity, Rachel also experienced moments of quiet insight and unexpected clarity. She recognized the transient nature of certain life events and the human capacity to find meaning even in disruption. Such realizations, psychologists note, are central to post-traumatic growth, where individuals not only recover from emotional challenges, but also gain deeper understanding, resilience, and perspective. Rachel's ability to perceive these truths amidst heartbreak underscored a remarkable maturity and emotional acuity, offering viewers both inspiration and reflection. Meanwhile, Michael grappled privately with feelings of regret, longing, and hope for Rachel's eventual understanding. He contemplated the profound impact of his decision, recognizing that love alone is sometimes insufficient when it is not aligned with compatible life goals. Experts in relational ethics highlight that such experiences illustrate the complex intersection between affection, foresight, and moral responsibility, emphasizing that ethical decisions in relationships often require balancing immediate emotional pain against long-term well-being. As the hours passed, both Rachel and Michael engaged in internal reflection that would shape their subsequent actions and emotional trajectories. Rachel, though initially consumed by grief, began to consider ways to honor her own journey while acknowledging the depth of their shared history. Michael, while experiencing the acute pain of separation, recognized that his choice could ultimately allow both of them to pursue authentic happiness in ways that would not have been possible otherwise. In this shared but divided experience, each found a pathway toward understanding and eventual acceptance. Family and friends, observing from the periphery, also began to grapple with the implications of the day's events. Their reactions were a mixture of concern, empathy, and reflection on their own experiences with love, commitment, and difficult choices. The collective processing of the event underscored a broader truth emphasized by social psychologists. Relational disruptions, while painful, often catalyze communal reflection, empathy, and emotional growth for both the directly involved and those who witness the process. The afternoon unfolded in a delicate balance of practical adjustments and emotional navigation. Rachel's decision to postpone the ceremony, to step away from the public spectacle, reflected an acute awareness of her own emotional limits and the necessity of self-preservation. Experts in coping strategies stress that acknowledging one's boundaries and taking deliberate steps to maintain emotional health is a crucial skill, particularly in high-stakes relational contexts. Rachel's actions exemplified this principle, demonstrating both foresight and courage. As the story continued to develop, questions naturally emerged about the long-term ramifications for both Rachel and Michael. How would this moment shape their perceptions of love, trust, and commitment? What lessons might they carry into future relationships, personal growth, and life decisions? Relationship specialists emphasize that such pivotal experiences often serve as turning points, catalyzing not only individual transformation, but also the development of relational wisdom that informs future partnerships. In these hours, Rachel's narrative became one of both heartbreak and profound insight. A story of love confronted with truth, of dreams reshaped by honesty, and of the delicate interplay between personal integrity and emotional attachment. Observers, whether friends, family, or a wider audience, were left to consider the universal implications that love, while powerful, is not always sufficient, and that courage, honesty, and empathy are indispensable in navigating the complexities of human connection. And so, as the sun began to dip below the horizon and the quiet of the estate settled into evening, Rachel remained in the bridal suite, letter in hand, processing the myriad emotions swirling within her. Each heartbeat carried both the ache of loss and the first glimmers of understanding, the realization that this day, though dramatically altered, was also a profound lesson in resilience, self-awareness, and the enduring capacity to act with grace amidst life's most difficult moments. Rachel remained in the quiet of the bridal suite, the letter from Michael still clutched gently in her hands, as the day she had imagined for so long transformed into something entirely unrecognizable. Every detail of the wedding, the floral arrangements, the glimmer of the chandelier, the carefully orchestrated seating, seemed to fade into a backdrop against the storm of emotions raging inside her. She felt the simultaneous weight of loss, betrayal, and understanding. A complex interplay that psychologists describe as cognitive and emotional dissonance, where the heart and mind struggle to reconcile love with unexpected reality. As the hours passed, Rachel's thoughts shifted toward reflection. She replayed memories with Michael, quiet evenings sharing tea, their first apartment filled with the awkward excitement of young love, their discussions about shared dreams of travel and family. Each recollection was now tinged with both warmth and sorrow. Mental health experts emphasize that reflective processing in moments of relational disruption allows individuals to integrate emotional experiences, eventually transforming grief into insight. Rachel's mind, despite the rawness of the moment, began navigating these internal landscapes, acknowledging the depth of her connection while simultaneously recognizing the necessity of Michael's choice. Outside the bridal suite, family members and close friends processed the events with their own mix of empathy, disbelief, and quiet concern. Her mother, holding back tears, reminded Rachel of her inner strength, recounting examples from her upbringing that demonstrated resilience in adversity. Friends, some visibly shaken, offered gentle reassurance, underscoring that stepping back from a relationship, even at its most dramatic juncture, was a courageous act of self-preservation and respect for both parties involved. Relationship experts often note that social support acts as a critical buffer against emotional overwhelm, providing both emotional validation and the comfort of shared humanity during acute grief. Meanwhile, Michael wrestled privately with the aftermath of his decision. His posture, his silences, the subtle tightness in his jaw revealed the emotional cost of honesty. A burden psychologists describe as anticipatory grief, the pain of witnessing a loved one's disappointment, even when the decision is morally sound. Michael had not acted impulsively. Weeks of reflection, consultations with trusted mentors, and personal introspection had culminated in this choice. Experts in emotional intelligence note that navigating such morally and emotionally charged decisions requires both courage and profound self-awareness, as the heart's desires often conflict with ethical responsibilities. Inside the suite, Rachel began to process the full spectrum of her emotions. She acknowledged heartbreak without allowing it to define her, a form of adaptive emotional regulation. Her grief was interlaced with admiration for Michael's courage, recognition of the love they had shared, and emerging clarity about her own needs and future. Psychologists often describe this nuanced response as emotional sophistication, reflecting a capacity to hold conflicting feelings simultaneously, to feel deeply while maintaining self-respect and perspective. As she began to stand and move about the room, Rachel noticed the symbolic weight of everyday objects. The ring she had intended to wear, the carefully folded invitations, the silk ribbons, each now a representation of a life that would not unfold as planned. These tangible reminders, psychologists note, often act as catalysts for both mourning and reflection, allowing individuals to externalize internal processes and gradually reconcile with reality. Outside, Michael waited with a quiet tension that mirrored Rachel's internal struggle. He reflected on the journey that had led them here, the early exhilaration, the deep companionship, the moments of joy that now existed only in memory. Experts in relational dynamics note that individuals who act with moral integrity in emotionally charged situations often experience a paradoxical combination of guilt, sorrow, and relief. Michael's relief was intertwined with the awareness that his honesty, though painful, could ultimately provide both himself and Rachel with a path toward authentic fulfillment. Friends who observed the unfolding events from a distance expressed a complex mix of emotions. Many experienced empathy for Rachel's heartbreak while simultaneously recognizing the ethical dimensions of Michael's choice. Social psychologists emphasize that such experiences catalyze broader reflection within communities, prompting conversations about honesty, integrity, and the necessity of difficult but conscientious decisions in relationships. Even without direct involvement, those who witness such moments often internalize lessons about emotional responsibility, empathy, and the interplay between love and ethics. Rachel, turning her attention inward, began to consider the lessons embedded within the day's events. She reflected on the nature of love, not as a guarantee of permanence, but as a force that demands both vulnerability and discernment. Relationship counselors highlight that such moments, though painful, provide opportunities for profound personal growth, as individuals learn to navigate the delicate balance between emotional attachment and the recognition of one's needs and boundaries. Rachel's insight mirrored this understanding, illuminating a path from despair toward clarity and resilience. By late afternoon, Rachel had begun to articulate her emotions in writing, journaling not to dwell on the past, but to process and integrate it. Experts in expressive writing suggest that such practices can alleviate emotional burden, foster insight, and create a structured means of processing complex feelings. Through her words, Rachel transformed the raw ache of loss into a narrative of understanding, resilience, and cautious hope. She acknowledged the depth of her love for Michael, recognized the necessity of his decision, and contemplated the wisdom inherent in stepping forward without attachment to the past. Michael, in parallel, engaged in his own reflective practices. He reached out to mentors, sought guidance from counselors, and undertook activities that fostered both personal insight and emotional accountability. By confronting the consequences of his actions, he cultivated a nuanced awareness of the intricate interplay between love, responsibility, and personal growth. Psychologists often note that individuals who engage in reflective processing following relational disruption demonstrate greater emotional resilience and capacity for empathy, both toward themselves and others. As evening approached, Rachel considered the public dimension of the unfolding narrative. Though she had intended the day to remain private, she understood that moments of profound relational upheaval often resonate universally. Experts in media and social psychology emphasize that personal experiences of love, loss, and ethical decision-making evoke empathy, reflection, and communal engagement. Rachel's story, while intensely personal, had begun to embody broader lessons about human vulnerability, moral courage, and the transformative potential of honesty. The culmination of the day approached as Rachel prepared to leave the bridal suite. She moved deliberately, carrying with her the weight of grief, but also the clarity of insight. Each step was an act of reconciliation with reality, a demonstration of both emotional strength and acceptance. The symbolic act of closing the door behind her mirrored an internal closure, an acknowledgement that while love may have faltered in its conventional trajectory, the lessons and growth it fostered would endure. Michael watched from a distance, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. There was no need for words, only recognition of the profound, shared humanity that had defined their connection. Experts in conflict resolution and emotional intelligence note that nonverbal acknowledgement in high-emotion contexts can convey respect, understanding, and closure more effectively than words alone. In this fleeting exchange, both Rachel and Michael achieved a measure of emotional equilibrium, a foundation upon which subsequent growth could be built. Over the following weeks, both individuals navigated distinct paths of reflection, healing, and personal development. Rachel immersed herself in professional and creative pursuits, channeling emotional energy into art, writing, and mentorship. Michael, in turn, pursued community engagement, professional mentorship, and introspective practice, seeking meaning and connection beyond the parameters of their past relationship. Observers and experts alike note that such adaptive strategies are instrumental in fostering resilience, emotional intelligence, and long-term well-being following relational disruption. Public discourse around the event began to emphasize themes of courage, integrity, and self-awareness. Social commentators and relationship specialists highlighted the ethical dimensions of Michael's choice, framing it as an example of principled action in emotionally charged circumstances. Rachel's composure and reflective processing were similarly lauded as models of adaptive emotional regulation and personal growth. The story, once centered on personal heartbreak, had evolved into a broader cultural conversation about honesty, empathy, and resilience in human relationships. In reflective interviews and journal entries, Rachel articulated key insights drawn from the experience: the importance of setting personal boundaries, the necessity of confronting difficult truths, and the transformative power of self-awareness. Michael, in parallel, acknowledged the enduring impact of ethical decision-making, the significance of emotional transparency, and the long-term value of courage in relationships. Together, their experiences illuminated the profound interplay between love, integrity, and human development, offering viewers a nuanced understanding of relational complexity. Months later, Rachel visited the gardens where she had imagined exchanging vows. The blooms were vibrant, the air rich with fragrance, and the sunlight soft and golden. She paused beneath an archway of roses, reflecting on the journey she had undertaken, from anticipation to heartbreak, from grief to understanding. Experts in emotional recovery highlight that revisiting symbolic sites can facilitate closure, allowing individuals to integrate emotional experiences into a coherent personal narrative. In that quiet moment, Rachel experienced a sense of peace, a recognition that growth and resilience emerge most vividly through adversity. Michael, at a separate location, quietly contemplated the ripple effects of his decision. He recognized the ethical complexity of the day, the emotional toll it exacted on both parties, and the long-term implications for personal growth. Psychologists often describe this as reflective equilibrium, the process of integrating ethical reasoning, emotional experience, and personal values to achieve internal coherence and understanding. Michael's reflections demonstrated an advanced capacity for self-awareness, empathy, and moral reasoning, further underscoring the depth of the lessons embedded in their shared history. As the narrative continued to unfold in both private and public spheres, it became clear that Rachel and Michael's experience had transcended individual heartbreak. It had become a story about human resilience, the moral imperatives inherent in love, and the delicate balance between vulnerability and integrity. Their journey illuminated universal truths: that love, while profound, requires alignment, communication, and self-awareness. That courage often involves difficult choices, and that true growth emerges not from avoidance, but from the deliberate confrontation of emotional and ethical challenges. Even as the sun set on the day that had so dramatically altered their lives, both Rachel and Michael carry forward the lessons of honesty, empathy, and self-respect. Their story, while deeply personal, offered a broader reflection on the human condition, a testament to the enduring capacity for growth, understanding, and grace, even amidst profound disappointment. Thanks for watching.